there's a lot of valuable time, valuable people's time on here. I am okay with being recorded. Let me click that button. Okay, very good. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm pleased to call the May 14th Executive Committee meeting to order. It's good to see you all this morning. I am not Chair Blakespear, as you can see. She is out of town this week, and I'm happy to fill in her place as your chair for the meeting this morning. Let's get started with some non-agenda comment. Francesca, do we have any public comments?
No, Vice Chair, I don't see any hands from the public.
Very good. Then I'll ask at this time if there's any committee member comment. Any committee members wishing to make any general comments to this morning? If not, we will move on to our executive director's report. Hassan?
Thank you, Mayor. Committee members, good morning to all of you. It's good to be with you this morning. A couple of things very quickly, and I'll do the detail of the board meeting, but I just want to thank Supervisor Larson, Tara Larson-Rimmer, Supervisor Anderson, Supervisor Nora Vargas, Supervisor Fletcher, Supervisor Desmond for voting unanimously to partner with Sandag and Caltrans for the broadband conduit outlay on the 67. This is truly an example of how we live up to our equity statement that the board adopted. It's a partnership. It's the first in the state of California to implement DIG once policy, governor executive order. And for San Diego to be the example, the first in the state to do this is just amazing. I want to thank my staff, Caltrans staff, the county staff, but especially Supervisor Tara Rimmer Larson, because her staff work all night to put the report together. So thank you very much. The CTC, the California Transportation Commission, allocated the funding 2 days ago. Subject to your approval of the item today at the board, we're ready to move and lay out 18 miles of conduit on the 67. And this is just the beginning of that. You're going to hear a lot about the regional transportation plan and the 5 big moves. I just want to remind you of the 2 workshops coming up next week. This is a chance to dive deep into the details. Colleen Clemens, our planning director, and Ray Major, our chief economist, is going to be there the whole time presenting and answering questions. Mayor, this concludes my report for now, and I'll do more detail at the board meeting.
Thank you, Hassan. Any committee members have questions for the executive director? If there are none, we will move on to consent. Committee members, we have a consent agenda. Does anyone wish to make a motion on the consent agenda?
Sotelo Solis, move consent.
Great. We have a motion by Mayor Sotelo Solis. Anyone want a second? I believe that was Poway with the second.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Voss. So we have a motion by National City, a second by Poway. Francesca, let's vote, please.
Thank you, Vice Chair. For the City of San Diego, Vice Chair Gloria.
Aye.
Thank you. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Lawson-Remer.
Aye.
Thank you. For East County, Mayor Vasquez.
Aye.
Thank you. For North County Coastal, Mayor Hall.
Aye.
Thank you. For North County Inland, Mayor Voss.
Aye.
Thank you. And for South County, Second Vice Chair Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
Thank you. And that does pass unanimously.
Thank you, Francesca. That brings us to item number 4 on our agenda, a review of draft agendas. Victoria, the floor is yours.
Good morning. For your May 28th Board of Directors meeting, we have your standard public comments, followed by the comments from Hassan and the Executive Director. Under reports, we have one item, which will be discussion of the draft RTP. We'll be looking for feedback from the Board of Directors at this meeting, and subsequently seeking input from the public. Thus, the action will be discussion. This concludes the May 28th item, and I can move on to item 4B if you would like.
Please do.
Under item number 4B, June 11th, Board of Directors meeting, we have item number 1, which is public comment, followed by 2, which is the Executive Director's report. Under consent, you have item number 3, which is approval of the meeting minutes, followed by Policy Advisory Committee actions. Number 5 is the annual public transit report. We're looking for an approve. Item number 6 is the Transnet EMP land management call for projects. This is the 10th cycle. Item number 7 is the FY21 TDA productivity improvement program. So we'll be looking to approve the FY22 TDA allocations for both MTS and NCTD. Item number 8 is the America Rescue Plan Act, the FTA apportionment for grant applications. So we'll be seeking grants for some of the elements related to the pandemic. Item number 9 is the Section 5310 COVID Response Appropriations Act funding distribution. So again, another similar conversation coming up from the Transportation Committee to add more funds. Item number 10 is the FY20 audited comprehensive annual financial report, which is compliant with auditing standards 114. Item number 11 is the quarterly report on SANDAG capital program, which is looking for information. It's an information item, followed by items number 12 and 13, which is your quarterly finance report and your executive director delegated actions. Both are for information. Under your chair's report, we have item number 14, which is the audit committee compensation ad hoc subcommittee. So we'll be looking for discussion, possible action on this item related to compensation for the independent auditor. Under reports, we have item number 15, which is the annual review of proposed bylaws and board policies. Amberlynn will be looking for an approve. Under number 16, this is an information item that Antoinette will provide related to remote working and a survey of business and employees pre and post COVID. And last but not least is an update from Ramon on the Mid-Coast Corridor Transit Project. This concludes my report, and the executive committee is asked to approve items 4A and 4B as amended. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Ask the clerk if there's any members of the public wishing to speak on this item.
No, Chair, no hands from the public.
Very good. We'll go back to our members of our committee. Any committee members with questions for staff on this item? Seeing and hearing none, does anyone wish to make a motion on items 4A and 4B?
Poway, move approval.
Thank you, Mayor Voss. We have a motion for approval by Poway. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. So we have a second by Carlsbad. So committee, we have a motion by Poway, seconded by Carlsbad. This is on item 4 to move forward the draft board agendas, items 4A and 4B. No additional discussion. I'll call the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you very much. For the City of San Diego, Vice Chair Gloria.
Aye.
Thank you. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Lawson Reamer.
Aye.
Thank you. For East County, Mayor Vasquez.
Aye.
Thank you. For North County Coastal, Mayor Hall.
Aye.
Thank you. For North County Inland, Mayor Voss.
Aye.
Thank you. And for South County, Second Vice Chair Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
Thank you. And that does pass unanimously.
Thank you very much, Francesca. Committee, that brings us now to item number 5. I'm not going to jinx us, but I will note that we are moving at lightning speed. That's exactly how I like to run a meeting. So let's see if we can keep this winning streak going. No pressure, Andre, but you have item number 5, our proposed final FY22 program budget. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Gloria. Good morning, members of the committee. So we are here today to present the final proposed fiscal year 22 program budget. In presentations made to the executive committee in February and March, we reviewed the draft budget highlights, the expected funding status, discussed budget adjustments such as the increased transit administration funds and use of contingency reserves. Today's report will be brief as it only focuses on changes made since the March draft budget. So as a reminder, the proposed fiscal year 22 program budget totals $1.13 billion and includes $687 million in projected spending on capital improvements for next year, primarily consisting of transit program of projects, $52.1 million for the planning and data program, which we call the overall work program budget or the OWP, and $60.8 million for regional operations. Now, when the draft budget was presented in March, we let you know that a salary range study was in progress and the results would be available in time for you to consider as part of the final budget. Salary range studies help to ensure SANDAG has competitive pay rates and support our goals for attracting and retaining employees. As Mary Kay's compensation program audit note last year, if we don't do these studies regularly, we won't know if we have market competitive rates. SANDAG typically conducts compensation studies every 2 to 3 years. The recommendations from the most recent study are shown in attachment 4. The proposed salary range recommendations do not change the draft budget presentation in March. Staff had already proposed 2 compensation pools in the draft budget, 3% for performance rewards and 1% for equity adjustment. As a reminder, the 1% pool will be used for base increases needed as a result of the study. These are for market or internal equity purposes. Just looking at the changes since the draft budget, very small amount of $500,000 for the total of $1.13 billion, which is just 0.04% change from the draft to final. Details of the changes are shown in attachment 3. Here are just a few of some of the highlights. The OWP budget is decreasing by $1 million due to some revised cash flow schedules for the 5310 vehicle project. The operations final proposed budget has increased by $600,000 based on a new ARGIS grant that was awarded recently in March. And changes to the capital budget since March show an increase in the multi-year budget of $42.5 million. These multi-year capital changes include $19.2 million of coronavirus response and relief funds for the bike program, $11 million of STIP and NCTD funds for the Delmar Bluffs 4 project, and a new grant for $9.6 million for FHWA for the next operating system implementation project, beginning in fiscal year 22 and continuing through fiscal year 25. So today, the Executive Committee is asked to recommend that the Board of Directors approve resolution number RTC 21-07, which is an attachment 2, adopting the proposed final fiscal year 22 program budget in substantially the same form as shown in attachment 5. That concludes my comments, Mayor, and staff is available to address any questions that you or the committee may have. Thank you.
Andre, thank you very much. I ask the clerk, do we have any public comments on this item?
No, Vice Chair, no hands from the public.
Very good. We'll return to members of the committee. First up, Andre, I would just thank you for the abbreviated presentation. As you mentioned, this is an update from our previous discussion of this item. And I'd like to thank the staff's work for the development of this year's budget. I think all of us in our respective jurisdictions know what a heavy lift putting together an annual spending plan is. Doing this and trying to accommodate the multiple major projects that SANDAG is undertaking at the moment, whether that's Mid-Coast Extension, which we're looking forward toward the completion of, the work on the North Coast Corridor, Otay Mesa East, not to mention the 2021 regional plan. There's a lot on SANDAG's plate. I would just ask, and I know this is the custom, but I just make these comments this morning to provide us with frequent updates on this budget and on Transnet revenues. I think all of us are watching our revenues closely because of the economic downturn that we've experienced or are experiencing, and want to make sure that the executive committee and the board are informed, particularly as it relates to our priority projects, making sure those things stay on track. I'm happy to support this item and interested in hearing other comments or questions from members of the committee. Anyone wish to make a comment or question for staff? And you can use the raise your hand button. I see Mayor Voss's camera's on. That's usually an indication if something wants to be said. Mayor, what do you got this morning?
Good morning, Mayor. Good to see you.
Likewise.
You know, I find myself on the horns of the same dilemma that I felt in March when we had the discussion about recommending the budget, the draft budget to the board. I appreciate staff's hard work. However, this morning I'm going to be a no on this. I'm not comfortable recommending to the board that they approve it. I'm comfortable recommending they consider it, but those semantics matter to me, so I wanted to make my position clear.
Thank you for those comments, Mayor. Other members of the committee wishing to make comments? I see National City's cameras on. Mayor, do you have anything on your mind?
Yeah, no, I wanted to thank staff for the presentation, and I think as we move forward, we need to also I get and respect Mayor Voss's perspective. It is about semantics. But as an executive team, we also want to share with our board members that, you know, our staff has worked hard and diligently on the budget priorities, you know, giving us the authority to make that final decision. And I think recognizing that our staff is hard at work. They are going to be picking up the pace, especially with the Big Five moves. So I will, you know, look forward to hearing my colleagues' comments in addition to this. But I think it's really important that we move forward with the budget as proposed. But I'll look forward to hearing my colleagues' comments as well. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other comments or questions? I don't see. Oh, there's Santee. Minto found the raise your hand button.
I did.
Good
Hey,
morning, Mayor.
Good morning. Hey, I just want to make one thing clear, at least from my perspective, kind of piggybacking on what Alejandra said, is that even though there, you know, certain members of the board may not agree or might have a different opinion on some of the budgeting items, I think the one thing that we all do agree on is that our staff works extremely hard. And I don't think they go out of their way to present something that they don't expect to be passed or looked at. It just so happens that sometimes, every once in a while, we just have folks that don't agree. My point is that I appreciate all the hard work, and I believe that the rest of this team does also. And so hope nobody ever takes it personally when somebody doesn't agree, but that's just the way it is sometimes. So I just want to kind of throw that out there. Thanks a lot.
Appreciate those comments, Mayor. I'm seeing no other hands raised, and want me to say efficient. Does anyone like to make a motion on this particular item?
Move for approval.
A motion by the City of National City to approve, to forward this recommendation to the full board. Is there a second for that motion? Mr. Kirk, forgive me, I forget the rules at Sandag. Can the chair of the meeting make a second?
Yes, you may.
Okay. I've been a part of different bodies that have different rules, so thank you for clarifying. I'm happy to second that. Let's keep this thing moving. Francesca, would you please call the roll?
Thank you very much. For the City of San Diego, Vice Chair Gloria.
Aye.
Thank you. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Lawson Reamer.
Aye.
Thank you. For East County, Mayor Vasquez.
Aye.
Thank you. For North County Coastal, Mayor Hall.
No.
Thank you. For North County Inland, Mayor Voss.
No.
Thank you. And for South County, Second Vice Chair Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
Thank you very much. And that does pass with 4 yeses and 2 nos.
Thank you, Francesca, and thank you, committee. And thank you, Mayor Minto, for those comments. You know, this is $1.1 billion worth of spending. It's difficult to get unanimity on such a matter. I think, you know, I'm happy to support things that maybe I personally may disagree with, but in advancing the overall cause, that's what regional governance looks like. So I appreciate those comments and the vote just now. That brings us to our next item on the agenda, the legislative status report. Robin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So in keeping with the budget theme, today is a big day for the state budget. I'm sure you've been seeing the announcements roll out all week. The governor will be releasing his May revise at 10:30 this morning, including his $100 billion California comeback plan. Like I said, we've been seeing various announcements throughout the week. In fact, he was here in San Diego earlier this week talking about his homelessness initiative. And we were also pleased to see what he shared when he was in LA, that he's going to be proposing $1.5 billion for litter cleanup. So that's really important and helps to support the efforts that we've been taking through our regional litter abatement subcommittee. The governor's budget, as I'm sure you've heard, is going to show about a $76 billion general fund surplus across 2 fiscal years. And we're also expecting about $26 billion in federal aid as well. So as you can imagine, there's a bit of a feeding frenzy going on right now. And I'm happy to say that we have both of our hands out as well. We're working with our coalitions across the state and our partner agencies, including MTC in the Bay Area, SCAG in LA, and SACOG in Sacramento, to do everything that we can to underscore the importance and the urgency of transportation projects, both as a way of advancing mobility, achieving our climate goals, and helping to bring the economy back on its feet. With that in mind, we submitted a letter to the budget committees earlier this week supporting specific funding for several transportation initiatives, highlighting our support for a brand new sustainable community strategy implementation grant program. Our hope is that this would provide direct funding to MPOs like SANDAG to help us implement our regional plans. That would be the first time that the state's ever actually provided direct funding for that purpose. We're also supporting funding for the active transportation program. This program is extremely oversubscribed, and SANDAG in the San Diego region tends to compete very well at the state level. So if we can get more funding in that program, that means more funding for our bike and pedestrian projects throughout the county. We, of course, are underscoring our support for resiliency efforts. As much as we can direct any funding to the Los Angeles corridor and moving the tracks off of the Del Mar Bluffs, we want to do that. Infill infrastructure grant program that will help with all of your local jurisdictions, helping to get the infrastructure you need to support implementation of RENA and build housing. And of course, broadband, addressing the digital divide. We're really pushing hard again with our partner agencies to help direct some of the federal funds that are going to California towards broadband deployment. And we never miss an opportunity to highlight our priority projects. So if there's any chance to get some direct funds for our priority projects, we're doing that. Since we last met with this committee, we've had meetings with the state treasurer, Fiona Ma, our newest assembly member, Dr. Akila Weber. We met with Assembly Member Ward earlier this week, and also hosted a joint legislative briefing last week with our state and federal legislative staff on our newest border delay study. So taking any opportunity that we can to just let everyone know all of the tremendous work that we're doing in San Diego and all of the needs that we have. So if they happen to have any money, feel free to send it our way. We're also organizing a leadership delegation trip. It'll be virtual this year, unfortunately, to Sacramento in a couple of weeks, where we'll be able to build on all of these budget asks and hopefully see something come through in the actual budget that is required to be passed by June 15th. It's also a very critical juncture right now for the state legislative cycle. Right now, May 21st is a deadline for any fiscal bills to get out of the Appropriations Committee. So next week's going to be a really big week to see which bills will live or die through the remaining cycle. And then June 4th is the deadline to get out of the first house, meaning if you were introduced in the assembly, you need to be over on the Senate side by June 4th. So there's still, honestly, a few hundred bills that are on our list that we're keeping an eye on, but we wanted to highlight a few for you today because we'll likely be coming back in the next couple of months to start taking some positions, again, depending on which ones actually make it past this next threshold. So the first couple I wanted to mention have to do with broadband again, SB 4 by Senator Lena Gonzalez and AB 14 by Assemblymember Aguirre Curry. These are both related to the California Advanced Services Fund. If you haven't heard of this before, this is a fund that the Public Utilities Commission oversees. It is based on a collection of fees from folks, and then it's used to help, again, advance broadband deployment throughout the state. So these bills, both of them would extend the existence of this program, which is set to sunset soon, as well as expand the eligibility of projects and entities that can access these funds. We're also watching SB 671, again by Senator Lena Gonzalez. This has to do with zero emission vehicle freight. And so she's calling for an assessment to be made to identify corridors throughout the state that could support the deployment of ZEV freight infrastructure, and also expanding eligibility for state funding for those purposes. So this one's important as our region in particular is looking at where we can go with clean transportation, electrification, and how we're making sure that we don't lose sight of the importance of goods movement throughout the state. AB 43 by Assemblymember Laura Friedman is another bill we're keeping an eye on, and I think probably several of your jurisdictions have either taken positions or will be. This one's closely tied to Vision Zero. It would allow local authorities like yours the flexibility in setting speed limits by using factors like pedestrian and bicycle safety that currently are allowed but not required to be considered when you're setting those speed limits. AB 897 and SB 1 have to do with our resiliency focus. The first one is by Assemblymember Mullen and would establish the opportunity for regions to create climate collaboratives. And these climate collaboratives would be responsible for developing climate adaptation action plans. As you know, SANDAG traditionally has kind of filled this role for the San Diego region. And so we're wanting to make sure that as the bill moves through the process, it accounts for the role that the MPO and the COG has in this work. while encouraging participation with our stakeholders and others like our local collaborative on how best to advance our adaptation plans in the region. And then SB1 is actually Senate Pro Tem President Atkins' bill, and it has to do specifically with sea level rise. So of course, keeping a very close eye on that and how it relates to Del Mar Bluffs. This one's tied to some of the bond measures that are in play in the legislature right now, and would dedicate $100 million towards sea level rise purposes. And then there's a couple CEQA streamlining bills that we're always keeping an eye on, but this year in particular, because they have to do with transportation and transit. So SB 44 would be a CEQA streamlining bill for electric transit. And then SB 7 by, again, Senator Atkins actually has already been passed and is on its way to the governor's office. This would essentially extend the Environmental Leadership Act, or AB 900, as most people are most familiar with it. And then the last couple I'll just mention, and then we can go on to Lori. There's a few bills that actually have to do with SB 375 reform. And I know we're all keeping a close eye on SB 375 as we work on our regional plan. So these ones are really important for us to watch. AB 1147 by Assemblymember Friedman, SB 261 by Senator Allen, and SB 475 by Senator Cortese. So like I said, these all would in one way or another amend SB 375. A couple of those most likely are going to turn into 2-year bills. So we're working very closely with the authors to make sure we are a voice at the table and what it will look like at the end of the day. And AB 1147 likely will be moving forward this year. This one actually also has funding for SCS implementation. So we're working with the author to help develop what that grant program may look like. And then the last bill I wanted to mention, certainly last but not least, SB 684 by Senator Hueso. This one would create a California Border Commission. So again, given all of the great work that we do with our binational partners, our own Borders Committee and COBRO, we're watching to see where this bill goes and how it will interact with the work that the Lieutenant Governor already is doing between the United States and Mexico. Most of these bills, if I didn't already say they were enrolled, are in appropriations. So like I said, we'll see after next week's which ones are still alive and keep you updated going forward. I'm happy to stop for questions, or we can move right on to Lori and the federal update and then take questions at the end.
Robin, you have a way with words. I'm getting through all that. Why don't we, if it's okay with the committee, we'll take Lori's report as well and then just handle questions all together.
Sounds good. That's my cue. During last month's update, I mentioned that Congress had brought back a process known to many as earmarks, or the community project funding. The deadline for these House appropriations requests was at the end of April. So at this point, House appropriators are reviewing all of the submitted requests from each participating House member. A similar process is also underway in the Senate side. As a reminder, each House member had the opportunity to submit up to 10 requests under any one of the subcommittee titles. For SANDAG, our request focused on the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development account. As was noted last month, our submittals mostly focused on advancing SANDAG's priority projects. We were fortunate to have 4 appropriations earmarks carried forward by our House members. Representative Peters carried a $1 million ask to advance the long-term realignment study we are actively working on for the Losan corridor. Representative Vargas is carrying 3 of our asks: a multimodal feasibility study for Otay Mesa East point of entry, I'm sorry, I lost my place. Construction of the Bayshore Bikeway Barrio Logan segment, and completing final design for the Palomar rail grade separation. The House subcommittees will begin marking up the various appropriation bills in the next 2 weeks. So by June, and hopefully by my next report out, the region should have a good sense of which projects will advance to the full committee. And the Senate will be meeting around the same time for their requests as well. I'd like to thank the jurisdictions and regional partner agencies for all your support over the last month. It was a crazy time for us staff. Collectively, I think we did a great job of supporting each other's projects. At the last meeting, Vice Chair Gloria so poignantly asked what we will be doing to advocate for projects moving forward through this process and how our board members can help. San Diego does not have a delegate sitting on the House Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development Appropriations Subcommittee. So if there's any opportunity to leverage any other offices' connections, that would be one area where we would need support. Other than that, we will continue to push for messaging and advocating on our projects in the meantime. And speaking of advocating for our priority projects, On the House Transportation and Infrastructure and Authorization side of things, one of the reasons I think SANDAG was so successful in submitting authorization earmarks, and this is a separate process from the community project funding request that I just spoke about, was that we did a lot of the heavy lifting prior to the requesting process by making sure that our delegation knew what our priority projects were well ahead of when this process even began. We, as Robin mentioned, we held legislative briefings, one of which was the border delay study. We held a joint delegation meeting. We kept in constant contact with our congressional offices and worked really closely with them when the time came to submit our requests. For these member designated projects, SANDAG was successful in having all 5 of our member requests carried by our delegation. Representative Peters and Jacobs are jointly carrying a $25 million request on behalf of the Central Mobility Hub. This project request is to advance the design work and support the completion of the environmental documents for the facilities. Representative Levin is carrying a $12.5 million request for the Lausanne corridor to advance design for the relocation of the tracks. And then finally, Representative Vargas and ISA are carrying a joint $25 million request for construction of the Oto Mesa East point of entry and ancillary facilities. So together, SANDAG was able to request $62.5 million in projects for the San Diego region. This doesn't mean that we will get all of that funding or any of it by any means. As a reminder, at this point in the process, the House has been told they will get anywhere from 15 to 20 million per office. Of course, these details may change as the bill is considered, especially as the American Jobs Plan is simultaneously being discussed. And I'm sorry, the Lausanne corridor just went by my house, or train just went by. And speaking of the American Jobs Plan, it remains unclear how the surface transportation efforts in both chambers will mesh with the $2.25 trillion Biden administration proposal, which also includes hefty sums for transportation infrastructure. As a reminder, Biden's infrastructure plan is an 8-year plan, whereas the authorization bill is typically a 5-year bill. The jury is still out on how these bills will interact, but over the next 2 months or so, we should have a sense of how they will move forward together. So that concludes my federal update. Again, a lot of information. I will hand it over to Hector to give the border and binational updates. Hector, over to you.
Good morning. Thank you, Lori. As I know you have a busy day ahead, I will talk briefly about 3 topics: restrictions at your international land border crossings, elections in Baja California, and a little bit of a federal perspective. As you know, your land border crossings are still operating under restrictions, at least until next week, May 21st. But now, as we move ahead in vaccination and we start normalizing activities, more voices are calling to normalize border crossings too. Restrictions revealed that there are around 85,000 cross-border essential workers or citizens that have their homes south of the border. Maybe they cannot afford a house in San Diego, so they are experiencing very long hours of waiting to come to their work, sometimes up to 6 hours, even if Customs and Border Protection, CBP, is opening the maximum number of vehicle gates, now 31 in San Isidro. Good battery in my computer, oh my God. The other half of the border crossings, the tourism or families are not coming to San Diego, and businesses that depend on them are suffering the pandemic effects, but cannot recuperate or survive because of the restrictions at the border. For example, the San Isidro Chamber of Commerce reported that 97 businesses already closed attributed to restrictions at the border. In 1 year, from March to March, $644 million were lost in local sales in San Isidro. And for San Isidro, this is way below Lifeline. Normal sales are about 900 million, and estimated sales in 1 year of pandemic were 250. So resultant lost jobs are also estimated in 2000. On the other hand, bilateral trade is flowing well. Production lines are at full speed south of the border, and I want to acknowledge the County of San Diego that has been targeting workers in the maquiladora industry, offering vaccines in partnership with organizations such as the Oto Mesa Chamber of Commerce.
Okay. So,
now, elections in Baja California. Mexico is holding midterm elections on June 6th 3 weeks from now, and this will be the largest elections in their country. Mexico voters registry counts over 93 million people, and on the next elections, Mexicans will be electing over 20,000 positions in 3 levels of government, including the 500 Congress representatives or diputados, 15 state governors, including Baja California, 20 of the 32 state Congress or local Congress, and about 2,000 mayors and city councils or ayuntamientos, including all those in Baja California. For this, Mexico will be operating 163 precincts with almost 1.5 million citizens acting as electoral officers. 3 are the leading candidates for governor in Baja California: Marina Avila for Morena, the incumbent party; Guadalupe Jones for the coalition PAN, PRD, and PRI, the 4 old parties; and Jorge Hang for the PES. One of these will be the next governor of Baja California for the next 6 years, starting on November 1st. And why this is important? Because, as I mentioned, about 85,000 of your essential workers or citizens live there in Baja California. This number would be about the combined populations of National City and Coronado together. And as you know well, we are building a new international land border crossing the Otay Mesa East border, port of entry. Think in this context, in the implementation of the new free trade agreement of North America, the new USMCA, Mexico is the largest export market, 70% more than the second largest partner, that is Canada. And think in the future of many jobs that depend on this border equation. For example, San Diego's Caterpillar producing turbines in Turbotech, or Callaway producing its golf products in Baja California, or Medtronic's Hillrom, DJ Ortho, Well, Ali, or Great Back Medical producing medical devices in Tijuana for the US usage. In fact, Mexico is the largest supplier of medical devices to the United States, above Ireland and China. Santis Canting Bodies has a facility in Tecate, or Carlsbad Thermo Fisher in Tijuana. Mexico is the largest supplier of catheters and pacemakers for the United States. The new administrations in the state of Baja California share not only these 85,000 of San Diegans, but the whole region. Now, I'm closing at a federal level. I just want to mention that earlier this month, Vice President Kamala Harris had a virtual meeting with President Lopez Obrador to talk about bilateral collaboration. Of course, but focusing on the humanitarian crisis of immigrants coming to the United States. Both discussed alternatives to address the roots of irregular immigration and to secure the border. And Vice President Harris announced she will be visiting Mexico next month on June 8th. And I don't want to finish my report without mentioning that the border is joining SANDAG in the Bike Anywhere Week with a cross-border Zoom workshop next Friday, May 21st, with the participation of Supervisor Nora Vargas and Council Member Paloma Aguirre and Mayor of Tijuana, Carla Ruiz, and Secretary of SIDURT of Baja California, Karen Postlewaite. And with this, I conclude my report, and I will be glad, your team will be glad to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Hector, for those updates at all different levels of government. We'll turn, actually, let me ask the clerk, is there any comments from the public on this item?
No, Vice Chair, no hands from the public.
Very good. Then we'll turn to members of the committee. I see Mayor Jones has been patiently waiting. Any questions on any of the 3 reports, please? Committee members proceed. Mayor Jones, floor is yours.
Well, I was going back and forth because I went to grab my coffee and then I didn't hear the mention of the 7815 project, but I think Lori might have mentioned that. I don't know. I didn't notice. We actually sent a letter of support to Caltrans on that. So I just want to make sure that was included. And then also I did hear you mention the what is it? The Otay State Route 11. I did hear you mention that, but I also didn't hear the 52 congestion improvement project. So if those were included, my apologies. I had to run away for 1 second, so I wasn't sure if I missed that. So did you mention those?
Actually, you brought up a good point. I did not mention them in our SANDAG submitted. Our SANDAG submitted They were actually, the 7815 was actually submitted by Caltrans. I know we helped provide some information for that. And that was under Representative Isis district. And then the 52 improvements was a submittal by Santee. I think we were listed as one of the requesters, but they put in the request themselves. But you're absolutely correct. Those were included in ICE and Representative Ice's submittals for member designated projects. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Jones. No shame in getting coffee. We all can relate. Mayor Hall, I see your hand up.
Yes, I just want to make a comment with Hector. I mean, that was one of the best reports I've seen in a long time. And the information in that report, was unbelievable. And when we think of the border and the impacts, I would just like us to think that it's just not down at the border, but those impacts carry throughout the region. So as we plan for tomorrow, we need to be looking at this just in a greater way than just in the border area, and how those goods movement, and I believe you said 60,000 people cross the border, or try to cross the border every day to look for work, or workers are here in this region. And I just often wonder, when I think of all the help wanted signs I see in my city, how many of those might be traveling that far to gain employment. So again, I just want to thank you. That was a very good report.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. I completely agree. That was a very good presentation, Hector. Thank you for that. I don't see other members of the committee raising their hands. I might ask Robin a question. Given that our chair is not present today, I think if she were, she would ask either yourself or Caltrans friends to comment more on the funding identified for the cleanup of freeways that were announced by the governor on Tuesday. Robin, do you have any additional detail you can provide to that? Or I don't know if Caltrans has representation this morning that might be able to comment on that further.
Yeah, I'm looking to see if Gustavo's here. I don't see him, but I do think he's planning to update the board on that funding, if you don't mind waiting till the board meeting.
We've been patient for a long time now. We can be patient for a few more minutes. But I think
we do have him if you'd like to call on him.
Oh, yes, please. If he's here and available. I don't know if he's in panelist mode or whatnot, but I do think a lot of us do get a lot of questions from the public about that. And I think we're happy to hear about the governor's comments. Definitely curious, and maybe Robin, you know, in terms of how that funding is going to work. Is that a straight allocation to Caltrans? Is that funding to Sandag or to local jurisdictions?
Gustavo, are you there?
I
don't know if he needs to be promoted to panelist in order to be able to speak.
Well, Mayor, while he's getting promoted, we know that there were $1.5 billion statewide added to that program. And this is, the addition to that program means it's statewide, it gets decided by Caltrans, but it's added, and District 11, obviously, which represents San Diego, is gonna get more funding as a result. This is very good news. It's in the May revise. And I think it's fair to say, and you probably know this when you were in Sacramento, the needs are way beyond $1.5 billion. I mean, there were so many behind work in terms of litter, but it's a welcome news, $1.5 billion. And as you know, our chairwoman had a subcommittee working on this with Caltrans, but at the board meeting, we'll have Gustavo give more detail.
I see he's been promoted. Gustavo, any preview you can give the executive committee at the moment for the $1.5 billion?
Yes, good morning, Mayor Gloria. Thank you for promoting me to panelist. So yes,
congratulations.
What I can share. So what I can share is the $1.5 billion is a 3-year program that is focused on mainly 3 things. One is to step up our efforts to clean and remove litter from our highways, to be able to do more of the cleanups like the ones that we've been doing over the past few weekends and the one that we're going to be doing tomorrow on State Route 94, but also to engage more partners in those efforts. So part of it is to bring the equipment and the labor that Caltrans needs, but also is to be able to engage with more organizations like the Veteran Outreach Program, the Center for Employment Opportunity, as well as other nonprofit organizations like Surfrider and I Love Clean San Diego and other volunteer organizations. But about a third of the money is also would be flowing directly to local jurisdictions for beautification and cleanup efforts in local communities. So this is not just about the highway system, this is about all of the state. How the money would flow, very likely would flow through Caltrans, through our local assistance program, but would be going directly to cities and local jurisdictions, cities and counties and local jurisdictions. And about a third of the program would go into beautification of highways and ramps and interchanges, areas that have been neglected for a while. Perhaps they were built many years ago when we didn't used to do aesthetic treatments, and we would be able to engage local artists in beautifying some of our highways to make them to make the communities take a sense of pride into them and adopt them and make sure that they stay clean because they will look better than they currently are. And there's some funding as well for a robust education campaign that would focus on starting with school children, but going all the way up to colleges and involve the universities as well as the general public on why we shouldn't be littering our highways. So those are the main focuses. So removal of litter, engagement of local jurisdictions, and beautification through arts and other aesthetic treatments like that.
Yeah. Thanks for that, filling in some of the blanks there, Gustavo. Quick question or quick follow-up. With the planned removal of the tier system on June 15th, does that free up Caltrans to be able to do more delittering of the transportation network?
So one of the programs that has that went away was the court referral program, the one where people working through the courts in lieu of paying fines, they were coming into our right of way to remove litter. And that program was halted when the COVID pandemic started, but we just found out from the county at the last litter abatement subcommittee meeting that there were also some funding issues of why that contributed to why the program was halted. So from the look of it, it looks like even after June 15 restrictions are lifted, that program wouldn't start. But I think this Clean California may be able to provide the funding to be able for the county or other agencies to restart that program, and that would provide also another way of bringing in people to clean up the litter from our highways.
I see. Well, maybe that's something that our friends Supervisor Anderson and Lawson Reamer can follow up on. Gustavo, thanks for that information. I'm just channeling my inner Catherine Blakespeare to make sure that we're getting some of this on the record. And Mr. Clerk, I will stop because I recognize we're not noticed for a conversation about freeway litter. But when Robin mentioned it in a report, I wanted to follow up. And Robin, thanks for those comments, giving Supervisor Anderson and I some flashbacks to our days in Sacramento. I see no other committee members seeking recognition. So this is just an informational item, so no action is needed at this time. Any other folks for the good of the order on this particular agenda item? Seeing and hearing none. Everybody, that concludes this meeting. Our next executive committee meeting is on June the 11th. We will adjourn for now.